In 1997, lawmakers in the state of Texas created the rule that if you were in the top 10% of your high school class, you would automatically be admitted into the University of Texas at Austin. If you were not in the top 10% and you still applied, your race would be considered as a factor in your admission decision. This rule was put into place to push affirmative action and create a wider diversity in the students of the university. In 2008, Abigail Fisher, a white female, applied for undergraduate admission at UT, but she was not in the top 10% of her class. Therefore, her race was taken into consideration and she was denied acceptance. A month after getting denied, Fisher files a complaint to the Western District of Texas stating that her equal protection rights of the 14th Amendment were violated whenever the University of Texas considered her race in her admission. Fisher then submits a temporary injunction for her application to be reevaluated. Once again, she was denied. She takes the issue to court with her partner Rachel Michalowicz, where the University of Texas will be represented by Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott's office. In 2009, the district court rules that the University of Texas admissions policy is constitutional. Fisher and Michalowicz do not agree and then decide to appeal the decision to the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. 2 years later, in 2011, the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals states that UT's policy is constitutional yet again. Later that year, Fisher wants the case to be reviewed by the Supreme Court. However, this time her partner Michalowicz withdraws from the suit before the court date. In 2012, the Supreme Court agreed to hear Fisher versus Texas. The University of Texas then hired the Latham and Watkins law firm to represent their university in court. Now let's see what the outcomes of this case were.
After reflecting on this case, there are many ways we can connect this case to what we've learned in the classroom. In our classroom, we've learned about affirmative action, which was an outcome of a civil rights movement in the 1960s, which was intended to help minorities and women find equal opportunities in the workplace and in education. Abigail Fisher is a white woman who believed she was being a victim of reverse racism and believed the admissions decision was in violation of the Equal Protections Clause of the 14th Amendment. The court ruled in favor of the university because diversifying our student body is crucial for our colleges. The reason it is important for our student body to be so diverse is we need to give minorities and women the tools to succeed in the workplace so we can change the workplace demographics. By having our education system diverse, it will lead to changing our workforce and diversifying it more so everyone can have equal opportunities. In our classroom, while we are discussing affirmative action, we began to look at the myth about affirmative action. One of the myths was that some people believed affirmative action was reverse racism towards Caucasians and it gave minorities an unfair advantage. This is 100% incorrect. Minorities and women, primarily African Americans and Hispanics, are still one of the most underrepresented students in universities, especially Ivy Leagues. Studies have shown that African Americans and Hispanic students are more underrepresented at top colleges and universities than they were 35 years ago. Studies continue to show that African Americans make up less than 5% of the undergraduate population in the nation's most elite university. This is very alarming, even with programs like affirmative action that are designed to give minorities and women equal opportunities and equity they deserve. Minorities are still falling behind, and the student body and workplace are not diversifying. While we need to give everyone equal opportunities, we also need to give minorities and women equity, which means we need to give them the tools they need to be successful. The issue is treating everybody the same is actually not fair. It promotes privilege and equal treatment tries to erase our differences. When everyone is different, fairness and success also differs. In our classroom, we talked about why being colorblind was problematic. The big reason why being colorblind is problematic is that it tells minorities to suppress their backgrounds and experiences, and in turn, even suppress their identities. Race is also intimately tied to people's identities and culture and gives them a genuine sense of pride. In our classroom, we talked about why race was an important part of identity and we need to embrace our race and stories about race because these stories are vital and valuable and need to be heard and addressed. Affirmative action is a step towards giving minorities not only equality but equity and can help students of different races get the opportunities they need to succeed and get into prestigious colleges. We cannot look at affirmative action as a negative thing or reverse racism because it is not. We must look at it as giving our minorities equitable rights, which is long overdue.
One of the ways that the case of Fisher versus the University of Texas relates to the real world revolves around one of the most well-known companies in the world, Google. Google is currently under fire and is at the center point of a new lawsuit that alleges that they are using race and gender as factors in the hiring process. The lawsuit alleges that Google is being more preferential towards females, African Americans, and Hispanics in their hiring practices over the past several years. The lawsuit was brought on by Arnie Wilberg, who claims he was fired from Google for refusing to reject white and Asian American male candidates. If the allegations from Mr. Wilberg are true, this would make it a clear violation of affirmative action laws by Google, since they would be discriminating against a person's race and gender. This would be a stark contrast from the outcome of the Fisher versus the University of Texas trial, because this would show that there was an illegal racial and gender discrimination, unlike in the Fisher trial, where what UT was doing was not considered illegal. Another real-world example came from the Harvard Business Review, where they got 25 years of data showing that hiring discrimination against African Americans hasn't declined in those 25 years. This study shows clear signs of affirmative action violations that have consistently happened throughout the past 25 years, and nothing has happened to any of these companies that are violators. And since the data has no way of holding any of the companies accountable, their practices are likely to continue on as a result, which is very disheartening.
On June 24, 2013, the opinion on the Fisher versus the University of Texas case was delivered. Many people who are for affirmative action were on edge as this decision was being made, for fear that the case would go in a direction that undermines affirmative action. Justice Anthony M. Kennedy delivered the opinion. Lower courts ruled in favor of the university by a 4-3 majority. Fisher then appealed the decision and took the case to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court stated that the use of race as an admissions factor was deemed constitutional if it was used in good faith and if it was not the only determining factors for one's admission into the university. With this decision made, the Supreme Court vacated the case and remanded it back to the state court. The University of Texas is still held under strict scrutiny as they too narrowly tailor a compelling argument that the government can take an interest in. The university's plan is also narrowly tailored to serve this compelling interest of diversifying the student body because there are no other available and workable alternatives for doing so. The University of Texas's use of race as a consideration in the admissions process did not violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment,